Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the final monthly webinar for the National Drug Research Institute and our second annual webinar on this particular topic. For those who don't know me, my name is Jodie Grigg and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the National Drug Research Institute here at Curtin University in Perth. Before we kick off today's session, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we're meeting today. I'm joining you from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people here in beautiful Boorloo, Perth. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us here today. Okay, so I think you're in for a real treat today. We have 4 excellent guest speakers who are going to help enlighten us on the current landscape of drug checking and alerts across Australia. We've extended the format today to 60 minutes to allow a bit more time for discussion. We'll begin with presenters from Pill Testing Australia and the Loop Australia, who will each speak for 10 minutes. Then we'll hear 5-minute presentations from the New South Wales Trial and the Prompt Response Network, and we'll finish with roughly 20 minutes of panel discussion where our speakers will address 2 to 3 set questions before we move to an audience Q&A. Please submit any questions you have through the Q&A function as the chat function is disabled today. This meeting is also being recorded and will be available on the Andrew website as soon as possible. So enough from me. I'll stop sharing my screen and introduce our first speaker for today, which is Steph Genettis. Steph is Executive Officer of Pill Testing Australia. She helped deliver Australia's first drug checking pilots in 2018 and 19, the first fixed site service in 2022, and expanded festival services in Queensland in 2024 and 5. She's volunteered for community legal centres and international harm reduction organisations, has represented civil society at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs, and served on several boards promoting health and rights of people who use drugs. So clearly a very high level of experience in this space. Over to you now, Steph.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Jodie. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands we're meeting on today and pay respect to elders past and present. I'm joining you from the top end of Te Waipunamu, Aotearoa, New Zealand's South Island. I do have a few slides to share, so wish me luck. I'll share screen now. Great. Okay. So we've been up to quite a lot over the last few years, and I'll just give a summary of festival-based. Oh, I'm having difficulty just sharing, moving the slides along, which didn't happen to us when we did the trial. Let me see if that works. There we go. So festival-based testing. In the ACT, we've been delivering services since April 2018, with 3 services delivered and 2 planned for this summer. Follow-up testing and immense support comes from Professor Malcolm McLeod of ANU. These services have all been self-funded from earned and contributed revenue. The 2019 service was independently evaluated, and that was funded by the ACT government. In Queensland, we've delivered 3 services as well, starting in March 2024, New Year's last year, and in April 2025. And we're devastated, as you can imagine, due to the legislative changes that took effect recently. We did have 4 services planned for this summer. In July last year, we formalized a partnership with HEST Paramedical, which has been invaluable, and each service has been larger than the last. Big thanks to Richard Bade of UQ for the follow-up testing with the work in Queensland. We received a small amount of funding from the Queensland government for that one, but the last service, which was the largest event we delivered services at, was completely self-funded, and we had intended for the 4 services this summer to be self-funded as well. In Victoria, we're in discussions with Vivim about a partnership and looking to make an application to deliver services in 26-27. For this summer, we're excited to be deploying new technology, in particular LCMS, so liquid chromatography mass spec, and you can see Blake and Mel walking around that instrument in the bottom right corner. We're also going to be deploying near IR, which is the instrument that looks like a torch. So these instruments will enhance our ability, our quantitative capacity, our ability to give purity results on site in very short amounts of time. Our festival-based services are 100% volunteer run. It's a low-cost model. It's an efficient service design, and we pride ourselves on short wait times and fast throughput rates. And we are a take-home naloxone supplier in both Queensland and ACT. If you want to check out any of the information about our festival-based services, that QR code goes to the Pill Testing Australia website. The FIX site, so that's the CanTest Health and Drug Checking Service, which opened in July 2022, has now tested over 6,000 samples. Pill Testing Australia is in a formal partnership with Directions Health, the lead agency, and Karma. It's funded by ACT government, and on site there is Brooker FTIR and Waters UPLC. So liquid chromatography is an instrument that can detect unknowns and quantify a limited number of substances. We also use test strips and reagents. Follow-up testing is done at ANU. LCMS is what's used for most quality control tests. GCMS is also used, and NMR, or nuclear magnetic resonance, which has been invaluable for detecting the 6 world first substances you'll see on the screen there. Malcolm McLeod was invited to present on the use of NMR for novel psychoactive substances in September at the UN ODC. You'll also see a list of novel benzos. We have deployed a new benzo method this year, also using LCMS. We're trialing a method to quantify GHB and GBL and 1,4-B, which is a common substitute for GHB. And you can find our year 3 report out soon. Please scan the QR code to check out the CanTest website. And you also see just a big congratulations to Mal. He was recently awarded the Graham Bately Medal for his contributions to analytical chemistry. Other things we've been up to: social media, research, and more. Many of you may follow us on socials and see the great work that my colleague Erica Franklin has been doing. Lots of great videos going out on Instagram and TikTok, with the videos on TikTok having more than 750,000 views. If you would like to check out any of our drug notices, we have the Night Coach app, which is free to download from Apple and Google Play. And we're excited to be part of the project led by Simon Lenton of Endry that was awarded the Medical Research Future Fund grant. It is looking at young people using polydrug substances and novel substances. So that's a 3-year project starting next year. Scanning the horizon, and this is my last slide. Now is a great time to see Commonwealth leadership and a national framework in the drug checking space. Now is a time to recognize that we are experiencing a global synthetic drug crisis, and it would be fantastic to have that acknowledged in the next iteration of the National Drug Strategy due out next year. Pill testing or drug checking data is so valuable to feed into early warning systems. It's pre-consumptive data. It's before a substance has caused harm, and it's also easier to identify the next drug X, the new unknown substance. So yeah, we really would love to see leadership at the Commonwealth level. It's also necessary for certain legislative changes to allow low contact models, which are in high demand, like mail-in services. These are important for access equity, but it's also the most common inquiry we receive. Another enabler that will help with this essential public health system is to see alternatives to criminalization, such as decriminalization. This is important for the health and human dignity of all people who use drugs. Other things we have on the horizon, we're very excited to have just recently purchased more capital. So we do have multiple testing instruments available for hire if anyone wants to reach out, as well as learnings to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steph, for that really concise summary of what I know is so much work. Been really loving Erica's social media videos lately, and the new Night Coach app is such a useful tool to be able to tell people about. I only wish we had some West Australian drug alerts feeding into that.
Thank you, Jodie.
So now I'd like to welcome our second speaker, Cameron Francis. Cam is the Chief Executive Officer of the Loop Australia. He is also a social worker with over 20 years experience in youth alcohol and other drugs. He's worked across peer education at music events, needle and syringe programs. He's done individual counselling and providing training and secondary consultation on complex youth AOD issues. So over to you, Cam.
Thank you, Jodie. Is my screen sharing working okay? You can see that? Awesome. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present. I want to firstly acknowledge traditional owners of the lands we're meeting on today. I'm coming at you from Magajan, also known as Brisbane, and acknowledging traditional owners, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and paying respects to elders past and present. I've just got a short presentation just to give you an overview of some of the work of the Loop Australia. I'll give you a little quick update on what's happening in Queensland as well with the recent legislation change, and a bit of a plug for our Victorian service. So the Loop is a not-for-profit charity. We were set up in 2018 by a group of volunteers, chemists, health workers, researchers, from Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. We all got together after sort of meeting each other and deciding that what we needed to do to make drug checking happen was to establish a not-for-profit organisation who would be a service provider to deliver drug checking services. And that's what we've been up to. So I'll give you just a really quick overview of the work we've done in the last couple of years. In New South Wales last year, we were able to deliver the first drug checking service in New South Wales, which was a research project led by Dr. Rob Page, who I'm sure a number of you will be familiar with Rob and his work. Rob ran a co-design with clients of the Medically Supervised Injecting Centre in Sydney to understand what clients of that service would want from a drug checking service, and then to kind of check the feasibility of implementing the service there. So for one afternoon a week, for just under 6 months, Rob and Dr. Richard Kevin, one of our chemists, delivered a drug checking service just using FTIR in the injecting centre to understand what the patron uptake would be, how feasible is it, what are the kind of issues with delivering it in a setting like that. So that work is currently being drafted for publication for peer-reviewed journals and should be coming out very soon. Also at the moment, we're doing a similar project again, also at MSIC. We're partnering with UTS in Sydney to trial the NIR, the near light that Steph showed before, the little handheld torch instrument that's able to really quickly measure the contents, major minor components of drugs and their purity, and just to understand how that could operate in a service like MSIC. FTIR, there's a bit of sample preparation. People have to hand over some of their drugs in order to have their drugs checked by FTIR, whereas the NIR might be able to overcome some of that. It's also a bit faster as well. So we're just working with UTS at the moment around that project. I think they're on week 6 of that one. In Queensland, we've been very active. In 2022, we conducted the first drug checking in Queensland when we got a licence to operate and permission to proceed underneath the police operational guidelines. So that was the first sort of drug checking operation that we were able to conduct. We then were funded by Queensland Health to deliver the Checkpoint service in partnership with Quinn and Quiver. Checkpoint delivered 2 fixed site services, one on the Gold Coast, one in Brisbane. We also did 1 festival as well under that partnership. The service operated from April 2024 up until April 2025, which is when the implementation pilot funding ended. I'll talk more about that in a sec. In Victoria, we've been awarded the contract to deliver the drug checking service trial in Victoria. This is a partnership with Harm Reduction Victoria and YSAS. This contract goes for 18 months. It involves 10 music festivals, so 5 last summer, 5 coming up this summer, as well as the fixed site service as well. So our first festival in Victoria was Beyond the Valley, which was just before New Year's Eve 2024. And then we've just announced our first few festivals for this season as well. The fixed site service opened in Fitzroy at the end of August. It operates on Thursday, Fridays and Saturdays. And we've got some data that I'll show you in a sec about that one. But I know the Queensland decision is one that's on a lot of people's minds because it's still relatively recent. I just wanted to give you a really quick summary of what went down in Queensland. So after Checkpoint funding ended, which was a part of an implementation pilot, so the contract ended, the service closed at the end of April. We then sought private funding to reopen the doors. We wanted to get the service back up and running, and we were successful at getting private philanthropic support to do that. As a part of the permit that we hold to deliver drug checking services, we are required to inform the Department of Health 60 business days prior to operating a service, which we did under the conditions of the permit. And what then occurred within the LNP was a discussion about should they let us go ahead or not. And we know that, so we plan to announce the service opening on International Overdose Day, which was our kind of launch event to announce the opening the following week. What we know happened was that a decision was made by the Cabinet of the LNP prior to Overdose Day happening, where they decided basically they would legislate to stop us from opening. So about 2 weeks after the announcement, when Parliament was sitting again, the LNP actually tacked an amendment to an unrelated health amendment bill, which had a clause in it that said that it is no longer permissible for the Director General of Queensland Health to issue a permit to handle illicit drugs for the purposes of drug checking. And that also applied retrospectively to any existing permits, because we did have a number of permits for festivals as well as fixed locations, and we're looking at expanding as well. So that effectively meant that the permits we had were withdrawn and no new permits would be issued by the government. So that decision sits within an amendment to the Medicines and Poisons Act. Actually, because it is an amendment, it is tacked on. It's not super hard to undo that in a legislative kind of sense, but it probably does require a change of government in order to make that happen, given that the Deputy Premier who leads the Conservative faction within the LNP have got the numbers in the Cabinet, including over the Premier. So the Conservative faction will continue to kind of dominate the policy situation within the LNP. It's interesting that the Health Minister himself is supportive of drug checking. We know that he's supportive of drug checking, but he doesn't have the numbers in Cabinet, and so has had to fall into line with the Conservative majority of Cabinet. There's a lot that went on around the decision that we know about. I mean, we know when it went to Cabinet, we know who was present. We understand the factional discussions and horse trading that went on behind the scenes around that as well. And we've got a very active campaign of advocacy planned over the next 6 to 12 months around, not just around drug checking, but also in Queensland. People may not realise we've got a very generous diversion scheme in Queensland. It's actually very generous decriminalisation, which was branded as expanded diversion. So a lot of the focus of our advocacy at the moment is around protecting that expanded diversion and making sure that the LNP don't come for that next, although there's no guarantee that that will be successful. In terms of our work in Victoria, there's a QR code there which will take you to the website of the service. The name of the service was granted to us by the government very generously. So we're open Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays. There's our opening hours. We are getting some extended opening hours for the summertime just to meet additional demand. And also there's a number of festivals and other events on across summertime. So stay tuned. We'll be announcing the extended hours. Exactly what the extended hours will be announced very soon. But I just wanted to show you some of our data from the fixed site in Victoria. Our first couple of monthly reports have just been released. These are all available on the VPTS website if you're interested, but that's month 1 and 2. Just noting month 1 was only 10 days. We opened on the 21st of August. So that's why those numbers were a little bit lower. We've had very strong uptake of the service. Our numbers are quite stable. We're fairly busy. It's looking like, you know, that month of September was around about 100 samples a week, which is about what we're seeing. We think there is definitely, we are seeing increasing demand though, and we're anticipating that to continue across the summertime as well. So those reports are all available on the VPTS website. If you are in Victoria, you are welcome to come by either to get your drugs checked on one of the days that we're open, but we are also offering tours as well for service providers or members of the public that would just like a tour of the service, and you get to talk to the chemist and have a look at some of the equipment. If you're interested in doing a tour of the service, just jump on the VPTS website and click on the Contact Us page. There's a little button there to book a tour, and you can book yourself in to come on by and have a look at some of the work happening in Victoria. I will just say too, Victoria, the fixed site we're using, the equipment we're using is FTIR. We're also using GCMS and paper spray mass spec as well, PSMS. We've also got secondary analysis that happens from a whole bunch of different partner labs if we require it as well. So yeah, jump on the website, have a look at some of our reports. And that's all I had prepared for you.
Thank you so much, Cam. Obviously, so much going on for the loop. It's been really disheartening to see the developments in Queensland, but there's also so many encouraging things going on as well. Really cool to see that we had Rob Page here in this session last year and how that's kind of paved the way for the trial in New South Wales. So yeah, exciting things happening there. So I'm going to now move on to our third speaker, Clancy Beckers. Drawing on lived experience and a decade of community drug testing, Clancy leads the peer harm reduction team in New South Wales drug checking trial. With roots in chemistry and public health, Clancy's leadership ensures drug checking services remain accessible, stigma-free, and grounded in both science and compassion. Over to you, Clancy.
Thanks for that. I would introduce myself, but you did a fantastic job. So I'm going to be talking about the New South Wales drug checking trial. I've got 5 minutes. I'm coming from the peer perspective, so I do not work for the New South Wales government, which means that I get to say some things that they can't. So where are we up to at the moment? So we're currently 5 festivals down. We're tracking to be at 12 by the end of the trial, which is the end of February next year. So far we've done Yours and Ours. That was a 2-day event. We did Midnight Mafia and Knockout. They're both hardstyle events. Hyperdome is a trance event. And we just wrapped up Strawberry Fields last weekend, which was absolutely insane. It was so much fun. Yeah, I can touch a bit on that a bit later. And we've got Hypersonic happening this weekend, which is pretty exciting. So how does it work? So we've essentially got 3 teams involved. The on-site delivery is mainly done by the newer peer workers and the FAS analysts, but we also have the New South Wales Health clinicians on site, and that's mainly for escalation purposes. So we have a shared legal authority. So what Cam was mentioning before, how up in Queensland, they got stripped of even the opportunity to allow pill testing. So we fortunately have that. So that's our legal authority, and we operate within a sort of festival health precincts that includes on-site harm reduction like Dancewives, as well as the medical providers as well. So after the festival, the data flows into the New South Wales Health surveillance teams. So we've got the Cosmos and the Sparta project, and that's essentially our sort of early warning and advisory groups, I'll say. So that's been happening for a fair few years now. So it's really great that sort of drug checking just gets to slot right into that awesome existing process. So similar to the other services, we use the NIR, so that's the NILAB. It's an amazing piece of technology. It's definitely going to be the future of drug checking. It's definitely going to be able to pave the way for community drug checking as well. So we also use FTIR color reagents if we need to. And we've got immunoassay strips for fentanyl and nitazenes, which are in quite high demand at the moment. And then post-event, FAST do their confirmatory testing back at the lab with all their cool tech equipment. And so far that's been tracking really well, kind of proving that the NILAB and the FTIR model is quite effective. There's some sort of insights in terms of substance trends. High dose MD is just everywhere. Aussies love MDMA and the quality here it's decent. So people trust it and they're just going to keep on using it. Pressed pills are, I guess, sort of starting to come back. Maybe they never left, who knows? Ketamine is everywhere. We love ketamine. Oh my God. But there's analogs, heaps of analogs popping up. We found a couple of those at Strawberry Fields. There'll be a loadout for that one soon. Because we're just doing festival-based drug checking in New South Wales, we don't get a huge diversity of substances. So if you kind of compare the festival results to fixed site results, we're finding novel substances at fixed sites in Australia, which I can talk a bit about later. Polysubstance use is extremely common. The majority of service users bring more than one sample, and they do intend to take those samples together. So a lot of our sort of education interactions are based around polysubstance use as well. So the naloxone uptake has been absolutely huge. And one really key factor is that uptake is driven by community care, not fear. So we can't just scare the shit out of people and expect them to take action. We need to educate them and empower them. So when it comes to the service in terms of trust, it's definitely been a sort of slow process building that trust because of the government. But fortunately, we have been able to build that trust and it's been quite effective. Our open plan layout is fantastic. There's actually pretty much a complete lack of privacy, which works exceptionally well. People can see exactly what their peers are doing, how they're feeling at different stages of the service. So that really kind of relieves their anxiety. And that also means that the group conversations really outperform the individual ones. People really want to have these chats together with their peers. They can do that sense making that way. And it also means that they can sort of, I guess, boost each other's confidence in those conversations. And to sort of, I guess, finish off with, these services need to be fun at festivals, not clinical. Otherwise, people won't go. They're there to have fun. And they are there to keep themselves safe. But if it's boring, if it's stressful, they're not going to do it. To really wrap up, we really need to explore this space more. There's so many different models and opportunities to sort of work in this space in Australia. And we really need to work together. And that's just not these organizations on this call, but it's governments working together. It's businesses working together. And it's other forms of sort of allied organizations that really need to step up to the plate and get this pushed forward and fight that stigma. Cheers.
Thank you, Clancy. I saw you speak at APSAT, and it's so cool to see how well all the different sectors are working together to make that service run so smoothly. I think we will have time to talk a little bit about Strawberry Fields at the end because we're running a little bit ahead of time. So I'll hand over now to our final speaker of the day, Jack Freestone. So Jack is a postdoctoral research fellow at the National Centre for Clinical Research on Emerging Drugs. He leads work on NCRED's Prompt Response Network and national collaboration of organisations and individuals dedicated to detecting and responding to acute concerns to health and wellbeing associated with Australia's unregulated drug market. Over to you, Jack.
Thank you so much. Jody, and thank you to my fellow presenters today. I also just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm coming to you from. So I'm coming to you from Gadigal land today and just paying my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So as Jody mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the Prompt Response Network today. So I'm the one presenter who's not talking about a drug checking service, but we do a lot of work with drug checking services at the Prompt Response Network. So I guess we've heard throughout the presentations today this idea about early warning systems, and this is something I like to present when I talk about the Prompt Response Network, just to situate where the Prompt Response Network sits in relation to an early warning system. So an early warning system, it's basically a coordinated system that proactively monitors for, identifies, responds to, and mitigates risks or harms which might arise from unregulated drug markets. So they're systems that exist within broader drug monitoring frameworks, and they really aim to promptly identify data on acute or event-based concerns, such as, for example, adulterated or particularly potent substances or clusters of drug overdose, where networks who comprise multiple different members collaborate to devise responses kind of close to real time. And often what we're talking about when we're talking about responses is we're talking about public drug alerts or urgent risk communications. So the Prompt Response Network really exists in this network collaboration space. And we bring together at the moment about 322 different individuals across about 90 different organisations across all different Australian states and territories and New Zealand who are involved in early warning systems in some way. And so we host a number of different meeting forums. We have a national meeting that happens on a quarterly basis. We also host a monthly meeting with different state and territory level public health leads. We have forums for community and peer-based organisations too. And we have some digital products. So there I've listed the Know, which is a website which reissues all alerts which have been issued across Australian states and territories, and the Know community, which is a private online community where people can share information as it relates to early warnings. So this is a bit of a screenshot from the Know community. So this is the members. We can see that we've got members across all different Australian states and territories and New Zealand too, but I've cut New Zealand out of that image, sorry, NZ. And we can also see the kind of things that are being posted on the Know community. So, you know, new reports that are coming out, alerts that are being issued, there's discussion forums as well. So if you would like to join the Know community, please do. You can do so by scanning that QR code there. And if you would like to sign up to look at the alerts which are coming out from the Know, you can access the Know website at any time, but if you'd like to get emails when those alerts come through, please sign up to our mailing list. So we've got about 500 subscribers to that mailing list currently, and on the bottom of this slide is just a screenshot of what the website looks like. The other thing which we've been investing in a bit more this year, I guess, is these summaries of alerts that we've been reposting on the Know. So, and these can be helpful. You know, we all have busy jobs and busy lives, and I think these summaries can be a really useful resource to kind of calibrate what we might be seeing in the market in Australia. And so up to the 30th of September, we'd seen 41 alerts issued across Australia. And I've just got some a link to the Q3 report there, but also some high level, I guess, stats or figures about what we saw in Q3. So in Q3, between July and September, we had 13 unique drug alerts, which were posted on the Know. Most frequently detected subclasses were benzodiazepines. So we had 12 reported detections of novel benzodiazepines across 4 different alerts. And we also had 5 different detections of nitazenes across 3 different alerts in Q3. We had one alert, which I've just highlighted here because I think it represents a bit of a discussion that we've been having over the PRN over the last year, which is, I guess, the presence of opiates in drugs thought to be stimulants like cocaine. And there was one alert which we saw in Q3 where we had 10 instances of people presenting across Sydney and northern New South Wales with severe opiate overdose after using what they thought to be was cocaine, which I think really just emphasizes kind of what Clancy was referring to with regards to promoting the use of naloxone, people carrying naloxone. So some future directions for the PRN. So we've been working with drug user organisations and the AVIL network across Australia throughout 2025 to design what we're calling a community drug reporting system. Now, what this system is it's a system whereby people who use drugs or service providers can report incidents or experiences as they relate to unregulated drug markets. So there might be anything noteworthy or unusual that could, serve for harm reduction and early warning systems. So we've been designing that system over the last year, and we're looking forward to doing a pilot implementation of that work into 2026. I also just want to mention 2 studies which we're planning to run in 2026 as well. So we've seen, I guess, across Australia this year, a lot of alerts issued about novel benzodiazepines. I had a look today. I think we've seen 16 different alerts issued around novel benzodiazepines this year alone, which is a really substantial uptick. And we are also seeing, novel benzos showing up in drug checking services, in coronial data, in our emergency department data as well. But we don't have a lot of, I guess, information about people who are using novel benzos, what their harm reduction knowledge is, what their experiences are. So we're planning to do this study called the Navigating Novel Benzos study, which will kick off recruiting for pretty early on into the new year. The other study, which I just wanted to mention, is this study, which is being led by my colleague, Stati Capri, which is the Australian Ketamine Survey. So we know, I think it's been mentioned a couple of times on this call, that we've been seeing a lot of ketamine showing up at drug checking services, a lot of ketamine analogs showing up at drug checking services. We've seen increasing amounts of ketamine use in Australia over the last few years and internationally, and certainly internationally, we've been seeing more people, I guess, presenting to services wanting to address ketamine use specifically. So this study, the Australian Ketamine study, it's a survey, and really what it's looking to do is just to gain a bit more of an understanding about, who's using ketamine in Australia, what their motivations for using ketamine are, and what their experiences are as well. So those were a couple of things that I wanted to mention on the horizon for us at the PRN. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Jack. That was so useful. I think we can't really have a conversation about surveillance and individual drug tracking services without considering the prompt response network. And it's been really cool to see how it's growing and all these different arms of it. Yeah, great stuff. We are running ahead of time, so I wondered if I could throw back to Clancy just quickly to tell us a little bit more about the strawberry fields before we kick off with the panel discussion.
Yeah, sure. I guess one of my main insights was we've done 5 events so far, 4 of them very much within New South Wales. This one was on the border, so it was like 85-90% Victorian crowd. Incredibly different. It really just sort of showcased to us how the attitudes of drug users in different states and different sort of locations, it changes so dramatically. And it was just, I feel like it was an empathy experience for us almost. And yeah, I don't know, I think it would be fascinating if like other services could, give it a crack in different states and all of that, because we learned so much from that one event than we would have learned from, another 4 New South Wales events. Yeah, that's sort of my main insight.
Thank you, Clancy. So we might roll into the panel discussion now. So I'll just ask that all speakers have their cameras on and possibly mics off. And we'll get into the set questions. I note that I think we've got 1 question in the Q&A. If anyone does have anything to add, please place it there for discussion at the end. So the first question I'm going to kick off with is that, of course, a lot of us here now agree that drug checking should be accessible to the whole of the Australian community, but obviously we don't have that access now. So what are your harm reduction suggestions for jurisdictions like WA who do not have drug checking services? And of course, existing services are not accessible to the whole of community, like regional and remote, and people that can't travel in. So what are some of the things that we can be doing in the absence of drug checking to keep people safe? And does anyone want to kick that off? Any volunteers?
I can have a go at that one.
Thanks, Cam.
I think that while the drug checking doesn't exist in some places, the information that you can get from where drug checking is happening can really inform harm reduction strategies. I mean, understanding that, you know, amongst the MDMA that we're really seeing very low levels of contamination. I think our September report in Victoria did find about 1 in 4 pressed tablets contained MDA. In some cases alongside MDMA, in some cases just MDA on its own. So knowing that that's a trend, then if you're in WA, getting Simon's reagent to screen your pills for MDA is like really useful. Simon's reagent will change colour in the presence of MDMA, but not in the presence of MDA. So knowing what we know from a drug checking service can translate into some like super useful harm reduction advice on how to get the most out of a reagent test kit if you are going to use it somewhere that, you know, where we're not able to get your drugs checked. So I think if you're in another state, keep eyes on the data, even though, of course, drug markets are really different across the country. But it is just, I think all of the data we're getting starts to show a bit of a picture, and that can feed advice to people who can't get access to a service.
Yeah, great point, Cam. Anybody else?
Sure. I'd just like to add this presentation is a great way to be raising awareness and keeping the conversation on a national scale. And then I find it really valuable participating in the prompt response quarterly meetings, seeing what the trends are in different jurisdictions, coming from different toxico-surveillance services, and then also just jumping on what Clancy was saying about delivering services in different jurisdictions. Our volunteer team is recruited from multiple states, and we've had people come from WA, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and other parts of the country to volunteer with us for specific events. So there's that, you know, kind of teaming that does happen. And so, yeah, if people do want to volunteer, approach us online.
Cool, thanks, Steph. Clancy, if you can say something.
Yeah, I'll put a shameless plug in for NUA's reagent store, which is testkits.nua.org.au, or you can just go to our website, or I don't know, Google pill testing kits Australia, it should come up. So that's, yeah, reagent testing is like, it's legacy drug checking, but it's a reason why it's stuck around. It works. It's easy for consumers to use, and it's very cost effective once you do the maths of how many bloody drugs you can check with a kit. It's thousands. So it comes to like 20 cents per test if you share it with mates and bring it to parties and stuff. Yeah, one big thing is that with fentanyl and nitazenes, there's some sort of tricky import licenses, and you've got to buy heaps of them at a time. So they're not really that common in Australia, nitazene strips and fentanyl strips, especially the nitazene strips. So yeah, I guess just sort of an indication for states that maybe don't have access to those. They can be quite difficult to get sometimes. But once you do get that sort of license, then yeah, Bob's your uncle, you're good to go. Yeah, that's sort of it. But also, yeah, there's so many ways that community can do their own forms of drug checking, whether it's as simple as bringing a reagent kit to a party, or I don't know, maybe if you want to save up and get an FTIR, that's up to you. The near labs are only 15 grand, plus a subscription, I believe. So, you know, it is getting much more accessible. And you don't need a whole ton of chemistry experience to do this sort of stuff. Just look it up on Reddit or Google and you're good to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I think one of the concerns we've had around the reagent testing kits is people not really knowing how to use them, or the limitations. So yeah, accessing the resources available online and just making sure you know what they can and can't do, I think is really important. I wondered, quite a few of the speakers touched on like high potency opioids now being detected in things like ketamine, cocaine, but then also that the MDMA is pretty like decent and quite high strength. So like I suppose for the average festival goer, that might be tricky. Like they've got a pretty good chance of it being MDMA, but you know, there's also that risk. So I guess I wonder, like, should like festival goers be carrying naloxone? Like, should event organizers be having that on hand and teaching people? Like, at what point does that community need to be more aware of the risk of that and prepared?
I'd love to see naloxone in every single first aid kit and part of standard first aid training. It's something everyone can have, and the myxoid nasal spray is so easy to use.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in and say something I got out of the conversation today was Clancy's contribution around, you know, not motivating people to use naloxone with fear, but motivating people to use with naloxone from the spirit of care, which I thought was really nice. And then I think also just the other part of that question, which was around the high dose MDMA and the fact that like a lot of the time, most of the time, the MDMA is pretty pure and is MDMA. I think, you know, we can and we should be aware of and focus on the fact that there can be adulterants in our unregulated drug market. And I think that's, you know, obviously why we need drug checking, but we also just need to be staying true to those, you know, good harm reduction practices in terms of starting low and going slow and really continuing to reinforce those messages as well, particularly when we're talking about things like high dose MDMA.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jack. I'm not seeing many questions in the Q&A, but I did have a second set question. Some of you have already touched on kind of what's on the horizon. But I did want to see just more broadly what everyone thinks is on the horizon and what are some of the challenges and perhaps opportunities that might be faced. Steph, you spoke about the potential for like a national framework. I guess I wonder what might that look like. And yeah, does anyone want to kick off with a response to that?
Just on the vision for a national framework.
Yeah, maybe if you start with that, Steph, and then we'll
Harm Reduction Australia is releasing a position paper very soon, which covers what we think would be quite valuable to include in such a framework. There's other examples with different subject matters, such as how work health safety, occupational health safety has been harmonized across the country. Also how health professionals are regulated. So those could be sort of legislative templates for what a framework looks like. There's also international examples like in New Zealand where the central government takes a leadership role in issuing licensing and doing quality control. But at the operational level, there's multiple providers.
Great, thanks for that information, Steph. Cam, I might hand to you because I know you spoke about the legislation in Queensland could be quite easy to reverse, but it would take maybe a change of government. Was there anything you wanted to talk about in terms of challenges and opportunities, or what's on the horizon?
Yeah, I think, I mean, aside from the straight political problems that I think we're probably going to keep having for a while, I mean, NSPs were sort of under threat for a long time after they were successfully first delivered. So once we, you know, get a policy win like make drug checking happen, there's no guarantee it's going to keep happening there's changes of government that could happen anywhere in the country, and we can be backwards really quick. So we shouldn't be complacent about the progress that we've made, because basically we need to protect it as soon as we've won it. I think the big barrier for expansion is around the risks of governments over-regulating drug checking services and making it more complicated than it should be. When governments first come at this topic, there's illegal drugs and they just freak out over that, and there's a tendency for governments to want to over-regulate, and I think that will limit expansion. So drug checking models, we need a range of different flexible models and different types of providers. Every NSP should have an FTIR in it. I mean, New Zealand's got multiple providers and a range of different models. And for us Australia is such a massive country, we're going to need a range of models. And at the moment, the regulatory approaches have been fairly narrow. They're quite focused on short-term trials or, pilots and evaluations and blah, blah, blah. And the scale is just nowhere near where we need to get it to. So governments need to back off a little bit, I think, in order to let the models evolve to meet the needs of a range of different populations.
Thank you, Cam. I've just refreshed the Q&A and noticed that we do have quite a few questions, so that's good. We've got another 10 minutes to get through a couple of those. I've seen one here has a like from Monica Barrett, or 2 likes now. So often the public, governments and many stakeholders see drug checking as for festivals only, or for people who only recreationally use drugs. How can we change the narrative towards more universal access to these services for all drugs and all communities who use them? Anyone want to kick that off?
I can touch on this briefly.
Thanks,
yeah, it's a very insightful question. I think that a lot of it has to do with institutionalized stigma. Festival drug checking is saving the children. It strums on a lot of heartstrings, and it's easy to sort of the narrative there is quite you can romanticize it almost, but with a fixed site, that's no longer about saving the children. That's about empowering drug users to make informed choices, which, yeah, it's very different narratives there. So I think that a big thing there is going to be huge sort of stigma reduction efforts, combined with statistical evidence that shows that fixed site pill testing and other models aside from festival drug checking does create positive health change and saves the public health system a ton of money.
Thanks, Clancy. I think that's a really great comprehensive answer. Does anyone have anything particularly that they want to add to that? Or I might move on to some of the other questions. All right, I might move on because we do have quite a few questions. Simon has asked, well, it's actually another question for Clancy. Can you say more about the Vic versus New South Wales differences?
Oh, I responded in the chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. All right, I will move on. A question from Sam College-Frisbee from Andrew. I have a question for Cameron. Can you give us some highlights from the M6 study? It sounds really interesting. Keen to know more if possible.
Sure. So basically the service there was good uptake of the service, that service users wanted to use it. There were some logistical issues in that, sometimes people come to MSIC in groups or in pairs, and if you want to use the drug checking service, someone has to wait then in that situation. It can't just be using FTIR anyway, that was one of the challenges, is that it'd have to be a wait for someone, which not everyone's wanting to wait in that kind of setting. So, that was probably one of the lessons. There's also a bit of a difference in and like you'd see service users at MSIC probably more likely, not universally, but we would see more people coming after they'd used something where they'd experienced an adverse effect, or were often coming in with believing that there's some contamination in my substance. either because they've used it already or it looks different, seems different, whatever. Whereas at like a festival, you'd have people coming in just wanting to stay safe, routinely bringing any of the drugs that they're buying because that's what I want to do. Whereas at MSIC, we'd often see people who were the ones who wanted to get their drugs checked a bit more motivated because there was a reason, like an adverse kind of effect from that. So part of that's informing the next bit of work that we're doing around the near light and how that might, could that address some of those challenges, or what other challenges does that now raise?
Oh, Jody, you're just on mute.
Thank you, Steph. I'm going to move to a question about the NRR technology, the torch technology, because quite a few of you mentioned that. The question was, what is the capacity of that torch technology to detect low proportional mass contaminants such as NSOs, and what are the implications of this?
I provided a brief response in the chat, just that it's an instrument better suited for the bulk component, and test strips are more useful for something like a potent opioid in a small amount.
Okay, thanks, Steph. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Probably got time for one or two more questions. Can panel members share insights re key considerations for community drug testing in terms of integration with existing health services who engage people who use drugs and ensuring an inclusive, accessible service for all?
I'm happy to talk to that one. I mean, our service models have been always co-designed with people who use drugs in advance. I think probably the best one was the checkpoint service in Queensland. We'd done co-design with Quinn and Quiver starting back in 2022, I think, well before the doors opened. Once the contract was kind of signed and we were kind of really ready to go, then we just ramped that up. And that was really targeted co-design. So looking at both existing service users, but also people who are not existing service users. We also were specifically targeting people who've never spoken to a health professional about drugs before, knowing that that's a different client group. We saw from those different groups very, very different feedback as well on the service model. We got really different kinds of perspectives on that. So I think that, and so then when we opened the doors of Checkpoint, we were like instantly able to engage with like a hugely diverse range of people from the very beginning. And that wasn't, they weren't existing clients of the service. I think only 25% of people we saw there had previously been to a Quinn service. So the majority were not. But we just were able to have better insights, I think, into what different types of people kind of needed. So I think the key to it is co-designing, and not just co-designing with the people who regularly walk through the door. It's actually really actively trying to understand who doesn't currently walk through the door and why is that and how do we find them.
Thank you, Cam. We do have a few more questions, but given the timing, I'm just going to go straight to one at the top, selfishly because it interests me. What are the on-ground experiences of festival goers in jurisdictions where there remains heavy police presence at festivals where drug checking services are operating?
They're confused as hell. Yeah. Completely mixed messages. It's very difficult for decision making and for people to apply legitimate harm reduction approaches to their drug use when they're being forced to take pretty extreme action just to get into the festival, let alone to finally get in there and then to be exposed to all this messaging of like, yeah, you're safe, come get your drugs tested, it's all good, man. It is so confusing for them. And yeah, at least in New South Wales, they come into the service with fear. We need to sort of calm people down a lot of the time once they get into the service. But that didn't happen at Strawberry. So I think there's something there.
Yeah, that makes
similar. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that makes sense. What's everyone else's experience?
We've had similar experiences in ACT at festivals. ACT has very progressive drug laws, and decrim was implemented about a year after the fixed site service can test was established. Some of our largest festivals actually have about 90% of patrons coming from New South Wales, particularly Sydney, and they're confused and reassured that they can relax. So that's part of inducting people into the service, that there aren't sniffer dogs at festivals and ACT, and we have support from police. We also found that the police in Queensland were also very supportive. So been really fortunate with our festival-based service delivery, but I know it's not the same at every festival-based service.
Thank you, Steph. We are almost at time, so I am going to have to close the panel now, but thank you all so much for giving us your time today. I'm just going to do a quick plug of our next webinar series. Can everybody see that? We'll be kicking off the ENDRI webinar series again next March with an ENDRI PhD showcase of 5 really fascinating projects. ENDRI are also hosting the ISSDP conference in June next year. The abstract deadline has been extended, so you have a couple more weeks to submit an abstract and come to beautiful Perth. So that's it for today and for the year. So thanks again, everyone, for your time. Have a great day.